Hello friends, we'll be discussing an illustration which is related to issue of debentures. Once we know, or rather we have already understood about three different case studies, or rather in the previous video we have understood about the different case studies we could do in one specific problem itself. We'll have certain continuation to that, and we'll have one specific problem which will have a part of oversubscription, under subscriptions in the case study, including the par, premium and discount concept here. Now, whenever debentures are being issued, we can treat them as shares as well. While passing the journal entries, of course, you don't have to go ahead and compare equity and debenture to be equal. However, they're completely different. But while passing the journal entries in terms of accounting manner, yes, we can go ahead and treat them on an equal basis. So we'll have oversubscription in this share, we'll have par, premium, and discount issue of shares, along with certain calls in arrears, and then we have to prepare the balance sheet for different case studies that we'll be giving you here forward. So let's start with one such illustration for you. Now, we have three cases to be discussed in total, that is case 1, case 2 and case 3. Every case will have a par, premium and a discount, either of the options. That means if case 1 has par, case 2 will have premium, case 3 will have discount as a problem. Each of this will have calls in arrears, and every other thing might have certain things like the way we discussed a part of oversubscription. So in every case, how oversubscription will work is something that I'm going to teach you today. So let's start with the case 1 here. Now, case 1 will refer to Messrs. ABC Limited. Now, Messrs. ABC Limited issued 6,009% debentures of the face value rupees 100 at rupees 100 itself. This is the case of par that we have to discuss. Now, this rupees 100 were payable in the following manner. Three patterns, or rather the application, allotment and final call. We'll keep it very simple for you so that you can understand how exactly the chronological pattern of journal entries has to be passed here. So on application, out of 100 they're taking 20 rupees. On allotment, out of 100 they're taking 60 rupees, and on the final call they're taking rupees 20 again. The total accumulates to rupees 100 here. Now let's go on to the part where we have to discuss about whether the oversubscription comes into the picture or not. Now, the company has mentioned that in case 1, subscribed debentures were around 8,000. That means 2,000 additional. And the company dealt with them in the following manner. Now, the company is saying that the company refunded 1,000 debentures. Now, the company has also mentioned that out of those subscribed debentures, they have refunded 1,000 debentures here, and the rest have been allotted to match the total 6,000 issue. That means 7,000 debentures were allotted somewhere around 6,000 debentures here. So 1,000, whatever additional application money that we have, we'll use that in allotment case scenario. Now, let's go on to the calls in arrears scenario here in this case study itself. Now, the company is also saying that Mr. X, who had around 500 debentures, didn't pay up those debentures final call money, and so did Mr. Y, who didn't pay for 500 shares allotment as well as the final call money. So both these people didn't pay that much of money on total of 1,000 shares here, which has been mentioned. Now we have to prepare the journal entries and the balance sheet for case 1. Now here case 1 is done. Let's hop on to case 2 and figure out what do we have there. Now, case 2 refers to Mrs. XYZ Limited Company, or rather firm, who issued debentures for subscription. Now, like this, 9,007% debentures of rupees 100 were issued at 110. That means this is the case of premium here. That 110 was payable in three ratios, or rather three-way. Application, it took around 30 rupees. Allotment, it took around 50 rupees, which includes the premium as well. And then next final call took around 30 rupees. This has been mentioned. Let's go on to the next part. Again, as I said, oversubscription will be a part of every case study just to make you sure how oversubscription works in such case scenarios. Let's do with oversubscription part here. Now, the subscription that we have received here was for 15,000 debentures, out of which the company decided that 5,000 will be refunded back and rest will be allotted as per pro rata basis. Now, once subscription is done, let's go on to the calls arrears, or rather amount which hasn't been paid by certain debenture holders. Now, when the question said, or rather, calls and errors are supposed to be discussed here, there is Mr. A, the holder of 150 shares or debentures who didn't pay the allotment and the final call money, and there is another person who had somewhere around 300 debentures here who didn't pay the final call money. So we need to pass the journal entries and the balance sheet. So this is what we have in case 2. Now let's go on to the last case, whereby if par has been done, premium has been done, now we have the discount here. Let's start with that. Now, Mask Company issued somewhere around 15,000 10% debentures of rupees 100 at rupees 80. That means they're already issuing the debentures at a discounted price here. Now, this 80 will be payable as follows. On application, they took around 20 rupees. On allotment, 50 rupees. And on the final call, it is rupees 10. Now, the allotment money has been adjusted, or rather, it has been the net amount after the discount has been deducted from that total. So, whatever 50 we have, if we add the 10 rupees additional to it, or rather 20 rupees additional to it, that is the discount value, that will be the total of allotment. So ideally allotment should have been 70, but they're already issuing at a discounted price. Hence, the allotment has come down to 50 here. Now, let's figure out the subscriptions. Now, the company received a subscription of 20,000 debentures, of which the company first went ahead and refunded 20,000 debentures, of which the company went ahead and refunded 2,000 debentures here. Next category comes where 10,000 debentures were given full allotment, and the balance left after refund and full allotment, whatever balance has been left, that was given pro rata adjustment. Now, this has been given as per subscription. There will be certain calls in arrears here as well. So let's figure out that part. Now, when it comes to call scenarios, there is only Mr. X who had around 1,000 debentures who failed to pay the allotment and the final call money. And after this, we only have to go ahead and pass the journal entries and the balance sheet to figure out this case 3. Now that everything has been given to you, case 1 par, case 2 premium, case 3 discount, with oversubscription and call scenarios being a part of all three sums in common. Let's figure out how to go ahead and solve each and every case study. If you have to draw a balance sheet in every case, so you'll have to do certain workings, or rather I would request you just pay attention on the journal entries that will be passing, and that will be much more enough to understand how to go ahead with the problem. So let's start with the problem here, rather case 1. So the first thing that we'll be doing ahead, or rather will be going ahead, is the passing of journal entries for case 1. Let's start with the case 1 where debentures were issued at par. So as we are passing the entries for debentures application, the first thing that will be doing ahead, or rather will be going ahead, was the receipt of application money for debentures. So let's start with that. Now, in case 1, the issue was for 6,000 debentures, but the subscriptions, or rather the applications that we received, was for 8,000 debentures. So let's start with the receipt of 8,000 debentures here. As the application money that we have to discuss here is about 20 rupees on per debenture. That means 8,000 multiplied by 20 will give you the value here for total bank receipt. So that will be a total of 1,60,000. Let's mention the narration here. So the narration has been also mentioned. Now, the company has also mentioned that when such debenture subscription came up, they refunded 1,000 debentures here straight away. So let's mention that refund entry here. Now, the application money that we received was somewhere around 20 rupees and 1,000 has been sent off. So 1,000 multiplied by 20 will give you the amount of refund here. So total of 20,000 amount was refunded. Let's mention the narration again. Now, the next entry will refer to details that we have to pass on for only transfer of debenture application to debenture account, only related to debentures. Now, as we know that only 6,000 debentures were supposed to be issued in case 1. So 6,000 multiplied by 20, whatever is the total will be moved to debenture application, and whatever excess we still have after refund will be moved to debenture allotment here. So let's mention that entry now. Now, the entry that we've passed here is 9% debenture application account debited to 9% debenture account and to debenture allotment account. This is the entry that we have passed. Now, the debit side has to be mentioned with total amount that we have received and the refunds that we have made. The difference between them will be the total of debit side here, and the credit side total will be the segregation of 9% debenture account will only have details of application money, and the excess, that means debit and credit, whatever balance is left on the credit side will be the allotment money that can be utilized when due amount is supposed to be received. So let's pass that. Now, the debenture application account total comes to 1,40,000, out of which debenture account will have a total of 1,20,000, which is only related to application capital, and the excess balance that we have is 20,000, which can be utilized when allotment money is due. So, in the case, or rather in the upcoming entries, when we mention that on X amount, or rather on allotment, there is certain amount that we are supposed to be expected, that expectation will be kept low. In reality, the reason being we already have certain money of allotment in advance with us. So let's mention the narration and then we'll start with the next entry related to allotment due. Now, the next entry will refer to allotment due entry. So let's pass the allotment due entry now. Now, when we're talking about allotment due, as these shares are on par, so there is no question of share premium or security premium being, or rather supposed to be mentioned in this entry. However, the entry that we're talking about is debenture allotment account debit, the total that we're expecting, to 9% debenture account, that will be 6,000 shares multiplied by 60, that is the allotment money. Total of 3,60,000 is what we are expecting here. That is our expectation. Now, the next entry will clarify how much entry, or rather how much amount we're supposed to receive here, because there will be certain call scenarios and there will be certain adjustment amount to be made here. So total amount that we are expecting here out of allotment is 3,60,000 as described earlier in the previous entry. Out of the 3,60,000, 20,000 we have already received in advance. Hence, that will be mentioned under the debit side category of debit side or rather debenture allotment adjustment account. Now, in the first case, there are two call scenarios. Basically, Mr. X and Mr. Y both are debenture holders of 500 shares each. Mr. X didn't pay the final pay or rather final call. However, Mr. Y didn't pay the allotment as well as the final call money. So here, the call scenarios will be 500 debentures multiplied by 60 rupees. That is the amount we haven't received. So in total, we haven't received 30,000 out of call scenarios, 20,000 out of adjustment. So total of 3,60,000. Out of that total, 50,000 will be subtracted. The balance left is 3,10,000. That will be the amount that we have received in our bank account. Now the next entry that will be passing here refers to the call money due or rather final call money due. So let's pass that entry now. Now again, when it comes to call money, that means total of whatever 6,000 debentures that we have, on that we are supposed to take another total of 20 rupees. So let's mention that. Now, the amount that we have to discuss here, or rather we have to take here, is the total of 6,000 debentures multiplied by 20 rupees. That means total of 1,20,000 is what we're expecting. That is the expectation. When it comes to reality check, we understand that there will be certain calls in arrears now, both for Mr. X and Mr. Y as well. So let's start with the due entry now. Now, after the final call being due, we are supposed to go ahead and mention the entry for receipt here. So let's start with that. So, as per the final call due entry, we're supposed to receive 1,20,000 here. However, there is certain, or rather, there are certain call scenarios that we have to mention. So, 1,20,000 is what we're expecting. Now, both Mr. X and Y didn't pay the final call money on their 500 individual debentures. That means total of 1,000 multiplied by 20 would be the calls in arrears here. So out of 1,20,000, 20,000 we are not going to receive anymore. That means total of receipt here will be bank account or rather 1 lakh rupees in the bank account. Now that we have passed the journal entries here, we are going to go ahead and prepare the balance sheet for case 1. So let's start with the balance sheet first. Now when we're preparing the balance sheet, we'll first prepare the bank account totals. That means the asset side will be first taken care of. So the total of bank account that we have received here is 5,50,000. Now we'll come on the liability side and we'll prepare the balance sheet, or rather we'll prepare the liability side total of the balance sheet here, which will have total of debentures, capital and the calls in arrears which will be subtracted from it. So the 9% debenture capital total comes to around 6 lakh rupees. Out of that, some or the other calls in arrears have to be subtracted. So let's mention that. Now, the total calls in arrears that we have here is 30,000 of allotment calls in arrears. Make sure you don't take that adjustment amount because that has been already adjusted. So it hasn't, or rather it is not supposed to be taken care here. Only the calls in arrears have to be taken care, which is 30,000 in allotment money and 20,000 in final call. Total of 50,000 is the calls in arrears. So on the liability side also we have a total of 5,50,000. So that is the final tally of the balance sheet here. Now, case 1 final tally of the balance sheet has been mentioned. That means case 1 has been completely closed here. Let's go on to the case 2 whereby we have to discuss about premium. Now, when it comes to case 2, we'll be passing the receipt of application money or rather that entry first. So let's start with that receipt here. Now, in the company or rather in the question, what they've mentioned is the subscription was for 15,000, whereas the issue was for 9,000 debentures here. That means there is again a part of oversubscription. Application money that we were taking here was around 30 rupees. So, total of first receipt that we'll have in terms of applications will be 15,000 multiplied by 30. That is the amount of debentures what we have received applications for. So the total amount that we have received here as debenture application is 4,50,000. Let's mention the narration here. Now, the next will be, again, as there is a pro rata, that means the company has reissued or rather rejected certain shares, refunded certain debentures here. So that entry is supposed to be mentioned. Let's pass that entry. Now, the refund here happened for 5,000 debentures. 5,000 multiplied by 30 will be the amount of refund that we have given here. So out of 4,50,000, we have already refunded 1,50,000 here. Let's mention the narration. Now, the next entry will refer to only debentures applications or rather debenture application money being transferred to debenture capital account. So let's move that, and balance will be adjusted in the allotment money because as you see that 5,000 were rejected, rest were taken into consideration here as per pro rata allotment. Now, the entry that we have passed here is debenture application account debit to 7% debentures account to debenture adjustment allotment account. Here, the balance will be taken care into allotment adjustment. However, the total money that we have to mention on the debit side is the total applications we have received, that is 4,50,000, subtracted with the refund amount. That means somewhere around we'll have a total of 3 lakhs on the debit side. And when we talk about debentures, 9% or rather 7% debentures that we have mentioned in this question, 7% debenture will have total of only the amount of issued debentures multiplied by the application money. That is the only amount that it will have. Now, 3 lakh is what we have mentioned on the debit side. On the credit side, 9% debenture will have 9,000 into 30. So total additional amount that we have on allotment is 30,000 itself that can be utilized to go ahead, and whenever the receipt of allotment money is supposed to be done, that money can be utilized there or adjusted there further. Now, the next entry will refer to allotment due. As this is a premium question, that means there is a premium in the question, will have share capital or security capital being credited here. Now, an allotment, the company is giving out or rather taking 50 rupees, which includes the premium of rupees 10 as well. That means 40 rupees is the capital, 10 rupees is the premium. Accordingly, we have to multiply and figure out the values here. So the amount has been mentioned. Let's mention the narration. So allotment money due has been mentioned and it has been mentioned in a clear-cut format. Now, the next part will be receipt of allotment money, which will have certain call scenarios and the adjustment allotment that we have already figured out in the previous entries here. Now, let's start with the next set of journal entries, which will refer to receipt of allotment money. Now, the next entry will refer to receipt of allotment money. Let's pass this entry here. So as in the debenture allotment account, we had already mentioned that we are expecting somewhere around 4,50,000, which includes the premium as well. So let's mention that. Now, the adjustment allotment, rather additional amount that we have received already in terms of advance, which can be utilized in adjustment or rather in allotment money adjustment, is amounting to 30,000. Let's mention that on the debit side. Now, calls in arrears here will refer to Mr. A who had 190 debentures who didn't pay the money referred to allotment here. Let's pass that entry. So the total amount here is 190 into 50 will give you a total of 9,500. Now, whatever balance is left will be the amount that we have received in our bank account. So the total amount that we have received here is 4,10,500. Let's mention the narration here. Now, after allotment comes the last part, that is final call due and final call received. So we'll pass the final call due entry now. Now, the final call due entry is debenture final call account debit to 7% debenture. That will be 9,000 multiplied by the total of 30 rupees. Let's mention the final amount in the column there. So, being final call due, we're supposed to expect an amount of 2,70,000 from final call. Let's see whether in the receipt entry we have that much of amount coming in or not, because there are certain call scenarios both from Mr. A and Mr. B here. Let's start with that. So in total, we're supposed to receive 2,70,000 is what our expectation was from the question given here. Now, Mr. A, who had 190 shares, Mr. B, who had 300 shares, both didn't pay the final call money. That means total of 490 shares, we haven't received any final call money. That is our calls in arrears here. So that means a total of 14,700 rupees we haven't received at all. Out of that, or rather out of 2,70,000, if you subtract this 14,700, we'll get the amount that we have received, and that will be the bank column total. So the total of money that we have received in our bank column is 2,55,300, which has been mentioned. Let's mention the narration of this last entry here, and then we'll move on to the preparation of balance sheet. Now that all the entries have been passed, we can go ahead and prepare the balance sheet for this specific question. Remember, there is security premium as well. There are calls in arrears as well. So you have to subtract separately. Make sure the capital for debenture is different. Security premium is different on the liability side. We'll get to explain that to you once we go ahead and start the balance sheet here. Let's start with the balance sheet now. Now that the balance sheet is supposed to be prepared, we'll have the prepared format here, and then we'll start with the liabilities and asset preparation. So in this meanwhile, we'll first start with the preparation of the totals of bank account. Let's mention the bank column, or rather bank details on the asset side first. So the total of bank account comes to somewhere around line 65,800. This is after adding all the debit side of bank entries and subtracting all the entries related to the bank credit. That means wherever bank account has been debited, we have added all those total, and wherever bank account has been credited, we have subtracted that much of total. So basically 1,50,000 is the only amount that will get subtracted. Rest everything will be added. So this is the amount that we're getting here. Now let's go on to the debenture capital, securities capital, or rather securities premium. Both these things will be subtracted with calls in arrears here. So we'll first mention the debenture capital here. So the 7% debenture capital is equivalent to a total of 9 lakh rupees. Now, the calls in arrears only related to the capital will be taken care of. Final call you already know. The only difference that you have to take care into consideration is the allotment money received here. Let's mention that. So, total calls in arrears will be only related to 22,300. Now, this 22,300 bifurcation will be provided. First, calls in arrears will be only related to 190 shares multiplied by the capital amount of 40 rupees on allotment because 10 rupees was premium. Hence, we are not taking that here. And the next call scenarios refer to total of 490 shares. 190 Mr. A, 300 Mr. B. Both failed to pay the total amount of final call money. Hence, that call scenarios, which is the final call scenarios, exactly we have mentioned here. So the total of both these things will give you this call scenarios. Let's mention the final amount in the outer column. So the final column is 8,77,700, which has been mentioned. Now the time comes for the security premium to be discussed. Now comes the part where we have to go ahead and prepare the securities premium account, excluding the calls in arrears from that. So let's start with that part. Now, when it comes to the security premium total, we are only supposed to take 10 rupees premium on the total issue. That means 9,000 shares multiplied by a total of 10 rupees. That is 90,000 total security premium that we're expecting. Out of that, whatever we haven't received is only for one specific person. 190 shares multiplied by 10, 1,900 is what we haven't received. So whatever balance is there will be taken outside. Now that everything has been mentioned here, the next part, what we have to go ahead and figure out is the total of all the liability side items and the asset side item, and just to figure out whether the balance sheet tallies or not. Let's start with that. So the balance sheet total that comes here is 9,65,800, which is equivalent on the liability side as well as on the asset side. So here we complete the case 2. Now it's time to go ahead and figure out the case 3 details. We'll start with the journal entries first. Now, in the case 3, where discount is supposed to be discussed here, there is an application for 20,000 debentures. So we'll first pass with those entries where application money is received here. So the total amount that we have to take into consideration here is 20,000 debentures is what we have received the application for. Application money is 20 rupees. 20,000 multiplied by 20 will give you an amount of 4 lakh rupees here. So that is supposed to be mentioned. Let's mention the narration for this. Now, the question also mentioned that whatever subscription we have received, we have divided them into 3 categories. The first being 2,000 being refunded back or rejected shares or debentures. Next category being 10,000 full allotment, and the balance left was given as per pro rata allotment. So whatever refunded or rejected shares are there, we'll go ahead and pass the rejected or refund entry there and there itself. Let's start with that. So that will be a total of 2,000 debentures multiplied by 20 rupees will give you an amount of 40,000 approx. Now, the next entry that we have to pass here is only the application money referred will be transferred to debenture capital. Let's start with that. Now, again, as we know the protocol that we have to follow here, that means debenture application amount will be total application received subtracted with the total refund here will give you the debit side of this. Let's figure out that part. So 4 lakh minus 40,000 will give you a total amount of 3,60,000 on the debit side. Now, application amount will refer only to the total number of applications that we could provide here, and that will be 15,000 in total. So let's start with that. 15,000 multiplied by the total application money, that is 20 rupees. So debenture application that can be transferred to debenture capital is only rupees 3 lakh. So additional 60,000 is what we have that can be utilized whenever we are going ahead with the allotment money due. Now the next entry that will be passing here is the allotment due entry. Let's start with that. Now here, this entry will be inverse of what used to pass in premium. In premium, we used to make sure that debenture allotment account is debited, and on the credit side, we have X% debentures to securities premium. This is what we used to do here. When it comes to discount, we have to take discount on debentures on the debit side. That means instead of premium that is credited here on the credit side, or rather that is getting credited, we have to mention that on the debit side here. That will be the discount total. So here, whatever entry you're going to pass will be debenture allotment account debit, discount on allotment to 10% debentures. This debentures of 10% will have a total amount of 50 rupees, which is taken on the allotment, plus 20 rupees that is given as a discount, because 100 rupees debenture is given at a 80% discount here, or rather 80 rupees discount, or probably 80 rupees is the issue price that we're taken into consideration. So 20 rupees, whatever discount was there, will add it to the allotment money. So the total allotment has to be done for 15,000 shares. 15,000 multiplied by 70 will be the 10% debenture account total here. So 10 lakh 50,000 is the amount that we're expecting here. Discount on allotment will be 15,000 multiplied by 20. So if 10 lakh 50,000 is the total, out of which 3 lakh is the discount, whatever amount we have is the balance, as or rather that can be expected from allotment here. So 7 lakh 50,000 is the allotment money that we can, or rather we can expect us to receive here. But that is again an expectation. The reason being there are certain calls in arrears as well in this question. Now, the next set of entries will refer to allotment received, final call due, and final call received. Let's start with that. Now, when it comes to receipt of allotment money, we understand that there is certain calls in arrears because Mr. X, who had 1,000 debentures, failed to pay the allotment and the final call. So we'll pass the receipt entry according to that. Now, when it comes to debenture allotment, we're supposed to expect around 7,50,000. So let's mention that on the credit side here. So out of 7,50,000, 50,000 is the calls in arrears. That means whatever we have received here is a total of 7 lakh rupees. Let's mention the narration now. Now, the next entry will be final call due. Now, on final call, we only had to take rupees 10. That means 15,000 multiplied by 10, 1,50,000 is the amount that we can expect. Now, the next, or rather the last entry will be the receipt of final call. That will be bank account debit, calls in arrears account debit, because there are certain calls in arrears here again, to debenture final call. Now, the expected amount is 1,50,000. Calls in arrears will be 1,000 shares multiplied by 10 rupees. So that will be a total of 10,000 rupees. So total amount that we have received in our bank account is 1,40,000. Now that all the entries are passed, we can go ahead and prepare the balance sheet here as well. So we'll first mention the bank account total. So the bank account total has come to 12 lakh rupees. The next step that we have to mention here is the miscellaneous expenditure, which is discount on issue of debentures. So the total discount that we have to mention here is of 3 lakh rupees, because 15,000 debentures multiplied by 20 rupees was the discount. So that we have to mention here. Now, on the liability side, when we move on, we'll have to mention the share capital or the debenture capital after subtracting the calls in arrears. So debenture capital total comes to 15 lakh rupees, out of which we have to subtract the calls in arrears first of all. Now, after subtracting the calls in arrears, we have a total of 14 lakh 40,000, in which we have to add the debenture adjustment allotment, which was done for 60,000. That will give you the total debenture capital outside, which will be 15 lakh rupees. Now it's time to figure out the liabilities total and the asset side total, which will be equivalent. Ideally, 15 lakh rupees on the liability side, and so is the asset side total as 15 lakh rupees. Let's mention that. So all these totals have been mentioned here. That means the case 3 balance sheet has been closed, and here we mark the closure of this specific illustration. I hope the oversubscription merged with pro rata, merged with call scenarios has been very interesting for you to know. So thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned with Ekeeda and keep subscribing to Ekeeda.